Hello.
Hello. How are you, Archie?
Good.
Have your chair?
Yes. That is my chair.
Good. Well, we are reading this book. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Yesterday, I was showing you some pictures of two things that Miss Camp has gotten to do that I really enjoyed. And when Jack was talking about something on the moon, it reminded me of these two things. So I want to show you some more pictures about that, and then we will see what they do with the moon buggy. But I was looking at page 26 here yesterday after we talked, and there are a couple things I forgot to mention. But first, Jack said the moon was the this is what he was thinking. The moon was the stillest place he had ever been. It was as still as a picture. Well, one thing that I noticed was yesterday we had been talking about a simile. Remember we talked about how Jack felt as light as a feather. And we had even talked, which page was it on? Right here, maybe? Yeah, that the book was as light as a feather. And we had talked about how when we have a simile, we have two things. The first thing might be a person or a place or a thing. It's a noun. This thing was a moon book, the book about the moon. And then we have another thing or an animal, also a noun. This was a feather. And we use this, something we know about this, to help us understand something about this. So we have to think about what word can we use to describe this that we can also use to describe this. And that word is an adjective. And the word we thought of, or that the author thought of, was light, because a feather is light. And so the author wrote that the book, this is noun number one, thing number one, is as light as, this is noun number two, thing number two, a feather. So with this pattern, if we see a thing is as blank as another thing, that is called a simile. And it's when we use, we have two things and we use the second thing to help us understand something about the first thing, because there's something about them, that's that adjective, that is similar between them. So then we saw that Jack felt as light as a feather, that as blank as, that's our simile. Well, we had one here, which is, it was as still as a picture. So when we look at this sentence, let's look at the sentence before it, because first of all, we have this pronoun it. And so we need to know what is it. And we need to look at the sentence before to help us figure that out. So here's the end of the sentence before. It starts here. The moon was the stillest place he had ever been. It was. So what do you think it is? What's he talking about? He's talking about the moon. So the moon was as still as a picture. So when we look at our simile here, in the yellow box is noun number one, that's the moon. And then the other noun is going to be a picture. Well, when you see a picture of something, it's not moving, right? A picture can't move. It's not a video. It's just a picture that you can draw, right? And it's not going to move. It's just, it doesn't move at all. And that's what still means. Still, this word right here, let me see. This word here still means it's not moving at all. It's not moving, it's not making any noise. It's just like frozen. And so we have here noun number 1, the moon, noun number 2, a picture. Well, what is it about a picture that's kind of like the moon? Nothing is moving. It's quiet, or there's no sound. It's just very, very still. And so this is the adjective. So we have noun, is or was, as, adjective, as, noun number 2. So this sentence is an example of a simile. And the moon and a picture are similar because they are both still. So no sound, nothing moving, no wind, right? It's just almost like everything is frozen. So we talked about, he said he couldn't imagine another place that he had ever experienced that he felt everything was this still. No sound, no wind, just, it was a weird feeling. And he even said he thought its stillness would never, ever end. So this made me think of 2 things I've done in my life. And I wanted to show you some better pictures of them.
Wow.
Cool, huh? So one thing I did was I took a helicopter to the top of a glacier in Alaska. And the other thing,
Isn't it cool?
I'm gonna show you some of those up close here. And the other thing I did was I went parasailing over a lake in America. So let me zoom in on these a little bit. So here, this is showing right here a glacier. A glacier is sometimes called a river of ice. And here you can see the helicopter is flying in front of a glacier. People like to take a boat to see a glacier, and then they just turn off the engines of the boat and they just sit and wait and they watch. Because what happens is the front part of the glacier, a part of it might break off and then fall into the water. That is called calving. And when the part of the glacier falls off and hits the water, it makes a huge sound. It almost sounds like an explosion. It's just a very big sound, and it hits the water and it causes a huge wave in the water. And then the wave starts coming toward you in the boat, and you need to turn on the engine of the boat and make sure that you get away to a safe distance so that the wave doesn't come and knock the boat over. Actually, you want to turn the boat so that you're facing the wave that's coming. You don't want to be sideways, then it's easier for the boat to tip over. But if you're facing it so that the bow of the boat, that's the front of the boat, is facing the wave, then when the wave hits the boat, you just kind of go up and you come down. And it's very exciting. This is showing some people standing on a glacier. And remember, I said yesterday that if you see any water, or here it's a crevice, you can see a really bright blue color. I think that blue color is just so pretty. I still remember that. And here you can see one person standing on a glacier. I remember when I was standing on a glacier, I felt like I was standing on a different planet. That's what I thought. It did not feel like I was standing on Earth. And I didn't feel wind or hear sound. It was a very still experience. Everything seemed very still. And here you can see someone standing on a glacier. Here you can see a helicopter has landed on a glacier. So something you can do. Excuse me?
Is this your helicopter?
I know. Something you can do if you visit Alaska is you can take a helicopter tour, and you can you pay a little money, and the driver or the pilot will take you to the top of a glacier, and you get out and you walk around. And here's one more. You can see these people.
But how do you get to the land? How do you get back to there? You're in the mountains. How do you get back?
The helicopter waits for you. And then he brings you back down to where your car is. So parasailing. Parasailing is when you're here hanging, you're in a chair that's connected to what looks like a big balloon.
A parachute. A parachute.
Parachute, right, parachute. Not a balloon, a parachute. I think yesterday I called it a balloon. That's completely the wrong thing to call it. And then you can see here, there's some kind of rope or string that connects it to the boat. And then as the boat's driving, it pulls the parachute behind it. Okay, so you can see there's the boat and there's the person being pulled behind it, and the parachute is holding him in the air. And here you can see the person up in the sky. And when you are up in the sky, I was really surprised at how quiet it was. I couldn't hear anything. I could hear nothing. It was, in fact, maybe it even felt more still than being on the glacier. I just felt I heard no sound at all. Now, this picture shows what you might see if you're up in the sky looking down. Then you're kind of looking at a mountain or the ground below you or the water below you. And even though there might be a lot of noise down there, you can't hear it when you're up in the air. So it's very still. So here's another picture of someone parasailing. And then here's one more picture. That looks like there are two people. Looks like there are two people there. All right.
Yes.
So those are my pictures of, now these are not pictures that I took, but these are things that I have done that I remember doing. I enjoy doing them. And what I remember about them is in both places, I did not hear any sound or feel any wind. It was very quiet and it was like nothing was moving. And so when Jack talks about how being on the moon felt like the stillest place he had ever been, those two places came to my mind. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention on this page here was we like to look out for when people say things that are figurative and not literal, which means the meaning is different from how it sounds. So here I noticed this sentence said, "It really hit Jack." Well, when we think of this word hit, you know, we think of if you have a bat, you can hit a baseball, or you can, you know, hit the table, or you can knock on the door. You know, we think of something that we do where one thing is hitting something else. But in this sentence, it really hit Jack. Nothing is literally hitting him. Nothing is touching him. This is more an expression of when all of a sudden, it says for the first time, all of a sudden, the thought comes to his head, huh, I'm really on the moon. We're really in outer space, right? Well, what happened right before that is we have to look here. It says he stared at the sky, ink black. Ink is something that you can use for writing. An octopus can squirt ink to help protect itself from anything in the ocean that it thinks might be a danger, or if it's afraid. right? It can use ink, which is black, that comes out. So ink is something that is black. Well, there can be different colors of ink, but when we say ink black, we're talking about very, very black. For example, right now, you turned your video off. So when I look at that little square where I normally see your face, all I see is black. I feel like I'm talking to ink blackness. So when Jack looks out at the sky, it's just ink black. Okay, not
you think I'm in outer space and giving you the ink black sky.
I feel like I'm staring into ink blackness. And then it showed us the picture. I think it's on the next page. Where is it? It's on this page. Where when he looks out into the sky, into the ink blackness, he saw Earth, right? We can look here and it's in color, and he can look out and see.
But we finished this page.
Yeah, so we're going to skip over that in a minute. So this is when it says it really hit Jack, it means when he's standing on the moon and he looks out and sees Earth, that's the first time where he really thinks, wow, we're not on Earth anymore. We are really in outer space. Wow. So he's kind of, I would say, stunned, right? He's overwhelmed. He just can't believe it. He's like, wow, we're really here. Okay, now let's find our star. Here it is. So they came to a crater, and in the bottom of the crater, they saw a moon buggy, which is a vehicle. And Annie wants to go for a ride. And Jack, remember, he's cautious, he's careful. And he said, we just have 2 hours of air in our tanks. But Annie, she says, well, we need to find this 4th M thing. And in the moon buggy, we will find it faster, she says, if we take the moon buggy. So she bounded, which is kind of like jumping, into the crater. And Jack says, he's always thinking, right? He says, but we can't drive. They're only 7 and 8 years old, said Jack. I bet I can drive this, said Annie. It looks easy. Come on. She jumped into the driver's seat. So what does Jack say? But you don't have a license, like a driver's license, said Jack. And Annie said, who cares, said Annie. There aren't any roads on the moon or stoplights or policemen either, right? Actually, there are no rules up there. She was right, Jack thought. Well, go slow, he said, and he climbed in beside her. Annie pushed a button labeled on. Remember we talked about this word labeled when we were looking at the diagram? When we were looking at the diagram of, that was, I think, not in this section, but in the last section. Remember when we were looking at the diagram of the moon base? And I said that a label is when you pick a part and you draw a line and then you write down the name of what it is. So when you are using a word to tell someone what something is, then you can label it. And so there's a button in the moon buggy that has the word on written on it. And so Annie just pushed it. I think Jack would have looked for directions. The moon buggy lurched backward. Lurched is kind of a funny word. It talks about how something's moving. And it means that it moved quickly in kind of a jerky way. It just like, and it moves. Probably faster than they were expecting. Yikes, said Annie. Step on the brake, said Jack. Do you know what the brake does in a car?
Yes, they stop the car.
That's right, it stops the car. Annie pressed a pedal on the floor. The buggy stopped with a jerk. So maybe she pushed it too hard and they were just like, stop, really fast. Phew, she said. Is this what page? Let me see what if we're on the right page. Okay. I don't want to skip a page like I did before. So Jack says, it must be in reverse. Now, do you know what reverse means in a car?
What is reverse?
Well, I want you to notice what is the first letter in the word reverse. And so in a car, when you're driving in a car, you have something that you can move with your hand, and you can either move it to D or to R. Have you ever noticed that?
Yes, I know.
The D stands for drive. That will let the car go forward. The R stands for reverse. That lets the car go backward. So Jack thinks that maybe the car is in reverse and they need to move that stick from the R to the D. He says, let me study this. Remember when we see this line at the end? It means that he's not done talking, right? He wants to finish his sentence. He probably wants to say something like, let me study this before we push any more buttons or try anything else. But if there's a line like this, it means either someone is interrupting him with speaking, or maybe someone is doing something that interrupts what he's saying. So he does not have a chance to finish saying what he's thinking. So, but before he could study anything or even finish his sentence, Annie pushed another button, right? Because Annie does not study things. The buggy tilted back. Its front wheels started to rise into the air. Uh-oh. Let me out of here, said Jack. Annie, what does she do? She just pushed more buttons. The buggy's front wheels landed back on the ground and the buggy leaped forward. Slower, said Jack. I can't, said Annie. I don't know how, right? Because she hasn't read any directions. Annie steered the buggy over the tracks on the ground. The wide wheels kept it from sinking into the deep dust. Careful, said Jack. The buggy zoomed out of the crater. Gray clouds of dust rose behind them as they took off across the moon. Dun, 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 dun. Chapter 5. Look at what this chapter is called.
Hang on.
Hang on. What do you think that means?
I don't know.
It means don't let go. I think it means the moon buggy is going so fast. Don't let go. Hold on. Annie drove the moon buggy over bumps and hollows. It bucked like a bronco. Do you know what it means to buck like a bronco? A bronco is a type of horse. And so if you...
Bronco.
A bucking bronco would be if you're on the kind of horse that's just...
Bronco.
If it's kicking its front legs up into the air or its back legs up into the air, and it makes it really hard to stay on. So you have to have a lot of balance and skill and hang on. I'm going through there. She pointed to an opening between two mountains. Jack held on to the dashboard. That's the part in front of you where the steering wheel is. The buggy bumped toward the opening and shot through. On the other side, the ground was even rockier, more rocks. Look for the fourth M thing, said Annie, bouncing up and down. Woo! Look at this. Look at their moon buggy. Check it out. What do you think this is? Looks kind of like a satellite, but I don't know. Maybe they'll tell us about it if we keep reading. One thing I noticed in this drawing of the moon buggy is I don't really see much of a dashboard. That would be right here. And I see her steering wheel here, but the front of the car looks kind of flat. All right, Jack groaned. Looking for anything on this wild ride was impossible, right? Not possible. The I am means not possible. He can't do it. He's like, slow down, he said. How? Who do you think is saying how?
Annie.
Yes, yeah. This is, I think you remember this, but let me make my line. It's sometimes hard to see where the indents are for a new paragraph when there's so many new paragraphs, because actually you can see if I get my highlighter, here's an indent, so that's a new paragraph. 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 And here's an indent, so that's a new paragraph. On this page, there's only two paragraphs that are more than one line, right? This one right here, that's more than one line because this word right here comes all the way out to the blue line, to the margin. And then this one, oops, sorry, let me get my pen. This one is more than one line because this word comes out to the margin. So my blue line here is the margin, and my orange highlighting, that's the indents. Remember, we have an indent at the beginning of a new paragraph. The indent is the space between the margin and the first letter of the first word of the new paragraph. And that space, that indent, tells us a new paragraph is starting. And this blue line here is called, do you remember? The margin line. And so we know that every time someone new is talking, we need to start a new paragraph. So that here, this paragraph, no one's talking. So here, Jack is going to start talking. So new paragraph, Jack is talking, he said. But then there's a new paragraph, which means it can't be Jack anymore. And the only other person who's there is Annie. So this is Annie talking. And then we have another new paragraph. So it can't be Annie. It has to be the other person. And there's only one other person there. So who's this? Who's saying this?
Who's that?
This one. Who's saying try pressing on the brake pedal?
Jacob?
Who do you think this is?
Jack.
That's right. Because this is Jack, Annie, Jack. And why do we know they're changing? Because it's a new paragraph, new paragraph, new paragraph. And every time the person who's talking changes to someone else, we have to start a new paragraph. So we know this one is Jack because it says he. This one, the author doesn't tell us who's talking, but we know it's someone else. We know it's someone new because there's a new paragraph and there's only one other person there. So we know it's Annie. And then here, the author doesn't tell us who's saying this, but we know it's a new paragraph. So we know someone new is talking. This was Annie. So the other person is Jack. So we have Jack, Annie, Jack. So the author doesn't need to tell us who's talking because we can look at the indents and see the paragraph changing. And then we know the speaker is changing. And we know there's only two people there. So we can keep track in our mind of who's speaking, right? This is one person and then it changes and then it changes. All right, so let's look at what, let's read this page. Jack groaned. Looking for anything on this wild ride was impossible. So slow down, he said. How? That's Annie. Try pressing on the brake pedal on the floor, slowly. So we know that's Jack. Annie pressed on the brake. The buggy slowed down. Jack sighed with, what do you think the next word is going to be? This is an expression we use in English. It's called sighed with relief. Sighed with relief. That's something we say in English. It's this part right here. Sighed with relief. That's like, whew. Okay. The ride was still bumpy, but now, at least, he could take a good look at the moon. He had never been to such a colorless, barren place. Barren means it's like nothing is living there. There's no trees, right? There's no plants. There's no life. It just seems lifeless, colorless. This suffix less, I think we've talked about that before. This is a suffix, which means we're adding letters to the end of a word. And less means without, which means it doesn't have it. So colorless means without color or no color. It says there was no green, no blue, no red, no water, no trees, no clouds. Doesn't actually sound very pretty. Only giant gray rocks and craters and dun 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 dun, an American flag. And we can see that here. Why do you think there's an American flag on the moon?
Because someone go there before.
That's right.
And astronaut will put flag on it.
Exactly correct. What color do you want us to use for our star today?
This color.
This color, so we're all set?
Yes.
All righty. Let me go like so I can say hello. And you know, I just haven't seen very much of you today. Oh, there you are. So time to say so long.
So long, Cheddar Chip.
Bye, Archie.
Bye.